Republicans getting set for their convention. The Democrats have just advanced, meantime, a couple of weeks ahead of their own convention, their most progressive platform in party history. In the platform, the party platform, there are calls for a $15 an hour minimum wage, something we've talked a lot about here. There's calls for the expansion of Social Security. There's calls for public health care option, public option. But is government, and more government, really the answer for impoverished areas that this platform would aim to help out? GOP strategist Jayana Caldwell joins us, as does Neil Sirocco, who's a Bernie Sanders supporter. Neil, I'll just start with you because a lot of this, it seems to be, has to do with, this has Bernie Sanders' fingerprints all over it, right? Some of these, the $15 an hour minimum wage and public option, things like that. Right?
Especially the $15 minimum wage tacked to inflation. Because at the end of the day, you shouldn't have to live in poverty when you're working a minimum wage job. That just shouldn't be the case, and that's what this platform allows us to say is true.
Okay, so the debate here, or the question here is, of course, there's a political question. Is Hillary Clinton being, quote-unquote, dragged too far to the left by Bernie Sanders? A lot of people have talked about that. I'm sure it'll come up tomorrow when the endorsement happens in New Hampshire and what have you. But, Jenna, the other question, economically, to get to the point that we're just hearing from Neil, is that if you have a $15 an hour minimum wage, Sanders was for that throughout. Hillary Clinton was really more for, hey, $12, $15 in some spots. How does that make sense across the board for the entire country? Some areas are different than others, right?
Well, we know that Hillary Clinton is a liar and a panderer, so you can't count on anything Hillary Clinton says outside of her saying her name is Hillary Clinton. That's pretty much it. But what we see with this $15 an hour platform is the Democratic Party is going to do what they do best, put businesses out of business. And we see when other cities have implemented this $15 an hour strategy, we saw that they've added machines. A lot of major businesses added machines and took
because those weren't happening before.
Well, that's the issue. No, but that is a serious. You don't think that's a serious issue?
No, it was happening.
It was happening.
Right, but the idea of incentives, and if you ask a business or force them right now to pay someone more than they can, quote-unquote, afford to do because they're trying to manage their costs, I mean, that does, you have fewer jobs, right? No, Neil?
No. What I'd say is I'd much rather go into this nomination with a candidate that's calling for a living minimum wage than a candidate who thinks the minimum wage needs to be even less than it is today. That's outrageous. That's what Donald Trump's agenda, and it's going to bankrupt America, not just businesses.
You and I both know that's a mischaracterization of his statement. He said that he was for a change in that. He wanted to make sure that there was businesses, there was relatively tax cuts, as well as a balance with the upward the minimum wage change.
No, I know.
So you have to
you're right. You're right. Donald Trump wants to give tax cuts to business. And Democrats are going to fight for a $15 minimum wage. I like our odds in that fight.
So how do you grow jobs? Do you know how that process works, or I don't know? You have to tax cuts
I do.
You grow jobs
by paying people. You grow jobs by paying people a living wage so that they can go out and buy the things they need to live a happy life.
But what if they don't have the job? I think the point, though, is whether they have the job in the first place, if the job is not eliminated because the wage goes up too much. I mean, there have been studies that have been done over the years that show that that's the way businesses will go in this situation if they're forced to do it.
And we don't even have to look
study after study shows that hasn't proven to be the case.
Sorry. Let Neil just answer to that first, John, and then I'll come back to you. Go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, I mean, study after study has shown that that's not the case. That is the theoretical belief. And listen, I've taken economics too. I know that's in theory how it works. But if you go to Seattle, they raised their minimum wage to $15 an hour, and they haven't seen a dramatic loss in jobs there. So there's no beef here. It's just not true.
In other
and
places,
the fact is that we have to have an economy where people make a living wage.
That goes back to my first question about whether you could do it across the board. Whereas a city where the living standards are already high, like this one, for example, New York, may be different than in other parts of the country. You know what I mean?
Not only that, and as he mentioned, Seattle recently changed their standard. So we're going to wait and look at that data. So you don't know. So you're mentioning things that haven't come out with the true data. And as you mentioned beef, we see that McDonald's is even looking to automate and change out employees for machines as well. So we know that this $15 an hour across the board platform that the Democrats are doing is pretty much a dangerous precedent.
Let me ask you, Neil, one last question.
It needs to be a city by city decision.
Which is the political question that you're a Bernie guy, you're a Bernie Sanders supporter. Now that he will endorse Secretary Clinton tomorrow, we all expect that at an event in New Hampshire. People in the Democratic Party, more probably to the center than you, will make the argument that he has, quote unquote, dragged her too far left. And that's why we're seeing these policies which could hurt her in the general. What do you say?
I think that Bernie Sanders' role in this race has pulled the Democratic Party closer to the majority of Americans who want to see a higher living wage. They want to see expanded Social Security. They want to see greater access to higher education through tuition-free college. So Bernie Sanders has done an incredible service to Democrats by making sure we're in line with the Democrats, Republicans, and independents who support that populist progressive agenda.
I don't know. I mean, the thing I'll say about him, and whatever you want to say about Bernie Sanders, he did get some of these concessions in the party platform, whatever the party platform is worth, that he pushed for. But thanks to both of you guys. We've got to move on to the market.